When it comes to From being a simulation, the things that we saw in this episode completely change everything, and it's not for the better. Tabitha seeing the boy in white after leaving the hospital is exactly what I'm talking about, because this shows things are getting very real about the idea of all of this being a simulation. Even way back then, people were already saying Tabitha never actually made it out, that she's only in the second level of the simulation, and the boy in white showing up is a huge piece of evidence that they could use in the future to say, hey, she never actually left, she was always inside of Fromland the entire time. And stuff like this is exactly why this theory is never going to die. It's so easy to make the argument that everything we have been seeing has been fake, that all the mysteries they've been bringing up will never be answered because it's all fake, it's all a simulation, right? It doesn't matter. And no, that's not acceptable in any way. But seeing the boy in white the way we did just makes the idea she never left to begin with seem infinitely more plausible. From the children in white all the way to the lighthouse, and even now with her being back in the real world, the boy's appearance to her can be seen as some sort of proof that the entire path she was following was some sort of elaborate mind game just to mess with her even more. And the fact that this isn't even the same boy in white we've been seeing the entire story just makes it seem like she really is just in a different level of the simulation. The hair definitely looks very different, but the face is very similar. This might genuinely be a different boy than the one we are used to seeing. Even in the trailer, the boy we've always seen looks the same as he always does. So this new appearance we see in this scene isn't about the actor going through puberty or whatever you want to say is happening. He genuinely looks very different, especially the hair, very different. And her falling off the lighthouse could simply have been the ascension to the next level of the game. We've already gotten so many signs that could show all of this was fake all along, with the way the actions and intelligence of the monsters changes and increases along with the actions and progressions of the townspeople. There's so much we've seen that could easily point towards it all being some sort of game. From the ever-increasing number of entities that seem to be watching and even influencing the actions of not only the people but possibly even the monsters themselves. The voice on the radio could also have been some sort of spectator, the entity who encouraged Jade to go into the underground tunnels where he discovered the root of the symbol, that one entity that was trying to prevent Boyd from destroying the music box by using his wife, and of course the entity trying to get Boyd to give up and accept defeat to the monsters. It's almost as if these entities are watching from the side for the fun of it, just like the spectators of any game. You can even speculate that each of these entities is betting on a different side to come out victorious, with some betting on the humans and others betting against them. It would definitely cast a lot of light for some of the actions we've already seen from these creatures, like the entity encouraging Jade to look for answers and confirming to him that the answers do in fact exist. He just needs to go out and look for them, and that's exactly what happened. He found them. And the Abby entity wanting Boyd to leave the 3 cicada victims down in the dungeon. It's definitely obvious who each of them is betting on to win this cursed game. The fact that these entities are mostly restricted to manipulation definitely hints at there being some sort of rules they have to follow if they want to win the game. We saw the Katri entity specifically refusing to identify himself, and Boyd also specified that he must be a different being to whatever it was that was using Abby's form in the dungeon. And with Tilly's incredibly suspicious nature, I think it's fair to say there's many more of these entities than we could possibly imagine. This might be the reason why Sarah hears so many voices speaking to her at the same time. They're all competing for the microphone, and all of them have their own agendas, and they're all betting on a different horse to win the game. That's why they're all manipulating the participants to ensure their own individual outcomes. To that one dog that possibly led Boyd to the talismans, the boy in white manipulating Tabitha to go to the lighthouse, and there was one dog watching Boyd as he was saying they will never break him, which might have been the entity that told the cowboy monster exactly what Boyd said. But of course, there's also the crows that fly around the sky, which may be connected to the monsters in some way. The priest, this guy, it's like he was trying to drive Tabitha to come to specific conclusions. Tabitha would never have even found Victor's home if the priest didn't tell her to look into the lunchbox. Him saying God is always watching them and talking about the dead baby was incredibly suspicious. He seems to know so much more than he was revealing in that moment, so him being some sort of entity would not be very surprising to me. It's also really interesting he only interacts with Tabitha and nobody else, just like this new boy in white that was watching Tabitha from across the street. The way this priest was directing her was like a video game character giving you instructions about your next quest and how to find its location. He's a very suspicious guy, and I've seen people saying that he could be Martin from the dungeon. I think they have very different voices, but we already know from the boy in white pretending to be the Ankui children that these entities can completely change their voices. The monster's new strategy and how they're behaving is obviously completely different to what they've ever done before. This is a massive point in the idea of everything being some sort of simulation. It's very common that enemies become tougher and harder to defeat as you progress more and more into a game. With the weather changing for the first time in at least 40 years, it's clear that Boyd's and the Matthews' actions of looking for answers, as well as possibly finding the talismans, is directly correlated with the escalating level of difficulty in this town. Boyd especially has done an insane amount of stuff, from killing Smiley and even smashing the music box, which was obviously a far higher being than the monsters, and that must have made a huge ripple in Fromland. And that could have caused the massive difficulty spike that the people are now fighting against. Maybe Boyd escalated things too fast outside the natural progression, so now the townspeople are facing these collective challenges at the same time when it may not be intended to happen in the order that we're seeing right now. And the Father Katri entity definitely seems to be the most powerful of all of them, because the Abby entity was in clear distress when Boyd was in the dungeon, almost like her own existence itself depended on Boyd sparing the music box, or maybe she wanted to take one of the bodies chained up on the walls. Either way, it's obvious she was not in control in that moment. The boy in white is the most mysterious by far. He appeared very powerful yet joyful during the massacre, and even the dog seemed somewhat subservient to him. But every other time he seemed like he was acting in secret and trying not to be discovered. But the Father Katri one has never shown any sign of distress at all. It's like he's always the top dog in every situation. Even when he talked to Boyd in this episode, he was extremely confident. It's like he knows there's absolutely nothing Boyd could ever do to stop him, so could he be the jellyfish on the cave drawings? There's also the voice on the radio, which may be on the side of the people, as it warned Jim Matthews about this place taking action against them. I've seen people saying he sounds like the cowboy, but personally, I do not hear it. The radio guy could be the entity that talked to Jade, or maybe it's been Christopher all along, who knows? We have no idea what happened to him after the massacre. If he's been alive this entire time, that would be insane. Ultimately, this idea of From being a simulation is very difficult to disprove. There's a lot of stuff that could easily point to it being the case, like how the land is completely covered in trees and the roads loop people back to the town. That could be seen as methods from the makers of the simulation to hide the parts of the game they never finished. Basically, beyond a certain point, it's just a barren wasteland with the canopy of the trees hiding that there's nothing underneath, because they never actually laid down any assets, or they can't lay down anything else because they simply need to save computing power for the simulation to actually run successfully. Tabitha ending up in some sort of second level has always been a wild theory, but the fact that she still has the clothes and the lunchbox can be seen as more proof she never actually left to begin with, and obviously the fact that there's a new boy in white watching her is also a great point to that theory. The priest is just incredibly suspicious in every way, and if it wasn't for him, Tabitha would have never even found Victor's home to begin with. There's a lot of creepiness about him, making it seem that he's working with Fromland one way or the other. The way the monsters are acting definitely speaks on this idea about them being upgraded as the people progress over time. I'm 100% against the from being a simulation theory, but obviously there's no way for me to know for certain. But how sure are you as an individual that it is a simulation or that it's not a simulation? I want to know that, and I want to know how long you've had that belief, and if you saw something specific in this story that made you believe one way or the other. Anyways, watch this video I made going over some of the most craziest and crackpot from theories I have ever seen, and trust me, there's a lot in there that may just completely blow your mind.